Hello, everyone. In this training session, we will cover the configuration of database items and database functions. Database items and database functions are used in the payroll formula to achieve the desired calculation in the payroll processing. The agenda of this training is to configure the database items and database functions. The goal here is to help you understand and configure the database items and database functions. This will enable you to create different database items and database functions which are used in the formula configuration for calculating the desired values according to the company policy. The prerequisites for this training are that you must have completed ONF 100 and PMT 2004 trainings. You must have checked the configuration videos of the component definition and the input values. This is simply because these component definitions and the input values also have a key role in database items. For the database item configuration, first you have to go to the General Setup menu and open the database item window. Then you have to create a new record, fill the required fields, and save the record. This will configure your database item. You will prepare the static database item manually, but the dynamic ones will be created automatically when you create the component input values and the balances. The prerequisites for the database item are before proceeding, the organization should be defined in the system. The field should be available in the screen for which you want to create the static database item. For the static database item, you define a field on a screen, and you can read that field value for a particular employee. When the formula is processing, it is important to have the fields on the screen first, and then you can create the static database items. The next step is the database function configuration. For this, you have to go to the General Setup menu, and under that, open the database function window. Then you will create a new record, fill the required fields on the database function, and save the record. Then, on the second tab, you have to fill the required fields on the function parameters and save the records, and the configuration of database functions is done. The prerequisites for the database functions are that the organization should be defined in the system. The required database function must be defined in the database before configuring the database function in the window. That means that whatever the database function you want to register in your database function screen, you have to define the database with the desired query and the arguments in the database first. And then you can register that in the screen, which can be used in the payroll formula calculations. So now let's jump to the system and see how we configure these in the system. This is the login screen of Onfinity, so we'll use unique credentials to log into the system. Let's log in with the admin role. Once we are logged in, we'll see a kind of dashboard, which will have various widgets and charts that give us day-to-day information and keep us updated on key information. We have logged in with the Sonic admin role. So before jumping into writing the formula, let's look at the input values, database items, and the database functions in the system. So, for the input values, we'll go into HR management, and in the general setup, we'll go to the component definition screen. In this component definition, we will select basic salary, and for the basic salary component, we have already defined these input values. These input values are tagged with salary amounts to different employees. To see these tagged values, we will go to the Workforce Management folder and then open the Employee Work Information Payroll screen. Let's choose an employee, Abhishek Sharma. Go to Employee Work Information, and here are the payroll components which are tagged. You can see the basic salary component, where we have mapped the input value as pay value, and given the amount as 50,000 rupees. This means that the basic salary of Abhishek Sharma is 50,000 rupees, and we will use this input value to retrieve the value of basic salary in our formula. In this way, you tag the input values to various employees. The next item is the database item. For the database item, we will go to the General Setup menu, and under that, go to Database Items. The database items are of two types, dynamic and static ones. As told earlier, the static ones you need to create in the system where you can fetch the value of a column from a certain table, and make sure that the column should be from the table where there is a direct relation with employee personal information primary key or work information primary key. Let's create a static database item now. For better understanding, let's go to employee personal information. And I want to create the database item for the start date of employees. The start date is in the employment start date field, and the column behind this is VA058_start date. So let's create a static database item here. We will click on New Record, choose the organization star, name the database item as employee date of joining. We'll set it as static and we need to choose the table. We'll choose C_B partner because our target table is C_B partner on personal information. After choosing this, we have to write the table name here. Then select the column which holds the start date of employees. It's VA058_start date. And in a similar way, we need to copy the name of column and paste it in the database column. Then we need to choose the key column based on which the values will be fetched. For every employee, C_B partner ID is unique. So we will choose C_B partner ID here. And similarly in this column, we will give C_B partner _ID. So whenever we will use this static database item in any of the formula, it will give us the start date of that particular employee for which the payroll formula is in execution. So in this way, we can create the static database items. The dynamic database items are created automatically whenever we create the components, input values, and the balances. We will see how to use these in the formula while writing the formula. So after the database items, let's have a look into the database functions. For that, you will go to the General Setup folder and then open the Screen Database Functions. Here, you will see some predefined database functions which come through the market automatically. But we can add our database functions here as many as we want. In order to create a database function, we have to define a database function in the database first. Now, for the sake of example, I have created a function called database functions in the database, getLeaves, which will get the number of leaves in a past duration for a particular employee. Let's create a database function. Here we will click on New Record. I will select the star organization because I'll be using this database function across all organizations. If you want to use that in a particular organization, you can choose that. Enter a name here. Let's give VA086_getLeaves. I'm using a prefix here because it tells which particular module this particular database function belongs to. Then you have to give the return type of the function. In this case, the return type is decimal because it will be returning the number of leaves. Then give the description here. Let's enter this function will get the number of leaves in a certain duration for a particular employee. Now save this database function, and then on the function parameters, you have to save the number of parameters in the same sequence in which you have defined in the backend database. On the first one, the first parameter is P_B partner ID. This name need not be the same that you have defined in the database function parameter, but it's important to have the same sequence as given in the backend parameters. So you can take any name, like we can take BPID here, and the name doesn't create any problem. Select the data type as integer, because the BPID is the primary key, and will be integer 1. Now add a new parameter by new record. You can see that the sequence number gets auto-populated with the next sequence with a difference of 10. So you have to mention the second parameter here as P_start date. This is the starting date after which you want to get the number of leaves. Then save the record and then create a new record again. On the sequence 30, add a parameter end date. This end date is the last date of the duration in which you want to get the number of leaves. Save this one and create a new record. The last one is the type. The type is paid or unpaid. You can pass here, and that will be a string type. So you can get the number of paid leaves and unpaid leaves according to the requirement. So in this way, you define the database function, and these database functions we can use in our formulas. Now, I'll be using one of these database functions in the formula of basic salary that we will be going to write in the next session. That concludes this session. Thank you for attending.